Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world today. My name is Paul Webb. I'm the founder of B2B Energy, and I'm also your host of Energy Speaks Back. We'd like to thank our sponsors today, B2B Energy and the Clean Energy Revolution. And if you want to know more about Clean Energy Revolution, go onto LinkedIn and type hashtag Clean Energy Revolution. Energy Speaks Back interviews energy experts from around the world. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to our summer series and episode 34 of Energy Speaks Back. Weekly, I present to you experts from around the world, and today we are in New York. And I'm interviewing an energy expert who is starting his career in energy recruitment and clean tech podcasting. Our purpose, as always, is to provide a good understanding of energy management knowledge from around the world, which is available today for us to deliver savings that impact on our planet. My guest today is a solar, wind, energy storage and clean tech headhunter and a fellow podcaster from New York. So without any further ado, I give you Silas Mähner. Good afternoon, Silas, and how are you today?
I'm great, Paul. It's good to be on the podcast. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And I'm saying good afternoon. It's more or less good evening for me. It must be afternoon for you now, yeah?
Yeah, it's afternoon here in New York City. It's a beautiful day.
Excellent. And what sort of season are we in New York at the moment? Spring?
Yeah, currently it's spring, which is, I think the general consensus is the best time in New York City, to be honest.
Do you know, I've been to New York now 3 times, and every time I've never been in the springtime, and every time everyone's told me I should have gone in the spring because it is the best time. But
I've
always gone in the winter. It's always been the winter when I've been there. Absolutely freezing cold. I think the last time I went there was -14. It was very cold.
Yeah, definitely winter is not the greatest time, depending on when you come. If you come Christmas time, that's not bad. But, just because you've got the magic of the city.
Yeah. Beautiful city. I love the place. So, Silas, give us, for the benefit of the audience and myself, really, I need to get to know you more. Give us some background to yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Silas Mähner. I'm currently a headhunter in the renewable energy and clean tech space. And kind of how I found my way here was, really, I guess the background for me specifically is I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. I'm oldest of 8 kids. Worked for my dad a lot growing up in his cabinet shop and just kind of in a relatively secluded type of life, right? The nearest town, that we would go shopping for groceries that was like 15 minutes away, population of like 4,000. So you get the picture, very, very small type of place. And, after I graduated high school, I ended up, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do with life. I was always a very curious person, constantly trying to figure out kind of what I wanted to do. One thing I was pretty sure of is that at some point I wanted to own my own business and run a business, but I didn't know what. And, I did a bunch of odd jobs and ended up in sales for about 1.5 years. And I think this was a pretty important experience for me because it ended up, the people that I was surrounded with generally were quite motivated simply by money. And, it became obvious to me about 1 year into it that money does not solve all problems. And I was just genuinely let down by kind of the anticipation I had thought money would, the happiness I thought it'd bring me. So once I realized that, it just became kind of unhappy. I started in search really, really even, more deeply, kind of just trying new things, figuring out what it was that interested me. And again, kind of with the only bearing being that I wanted to run my own business someday. So, that took about another year. And after about 1 year, I had gone through kind of a college alternative program, a university alternative, and ended up getting somebody who I'd met through that to reach out to me and ask me if I wanted to do recruitment and if I wanted to move to New York City. And obviously, a small country boy from, middle of nowhere in Wisconsin, that sounded pretty exciting to me. So I definitely wanted to chat about it. And, I ended up out here in New York City working with Next Wave Partners in recruitment in the renewable energy space. So I think, maybe a bit of background in that space too is, the reason I made this decision was at the time of making that decision, I knew I had narrowed it down a little bit. I wanted to be in the business building space, which is we can get to later, but basically I wanted to build many businesses throughout my life because I'm just fascinated by making things work, making them economical, making them work, creating something of value for the people around me, and just bringing out the best of people. Right, these are things I'm learning how to formalize now as I grow in my experience. But that's kind of why I ended up choosing this, was because I felt like there would be some great opportunities to learn, meet a lot of people, and to just kind of grow in business acumen in general through recruitment and through being able to consult people. So that's why I took this decision, decided to work with NextWave.
Right. And what sort of areas of renewables and clean tech are you getting involved? Is it specific, or is it sort of broad?
Yeah, so I guess our company, NextWave Partners in general, focuses. We do have a technology branch and we have renewables branch, but it's mainly offshore wind, solar, onshore wind, of course, too. So it's kind of those main renewable energy generation and infrastructure areas, and that's the areas I've focused on. I haven't focused on tech specifically, but really, clean tech is essentially this area that's interested me since the beginning. So when I first joined the company, my director made it known to me that there's a possibility to grow into this clean tech space, which is essentially taking over everything. Right? We know it's very obvious that in order for us to truly meet our climate targets, we need to do more than just generate electricity through a clean source. We need all of the sustainability type of things that go behind that. Supply chain, direct to consumer brands, everything. We need to reduce energy consumption at large and just kind of find ways to recycle what we have and just create this circular economy that we're looking for. So, I didn't know any of that. What I've just said, like, I knew nothing of that when I started, right? I just figured it'd be a good opportunity. So as I got into the space and as I started learning about how these things work, how the energy is generated and the general value chain, I started to just kind of peek into the clean tech side of things. And so that's what I'm working on now for the, with NextWave. I'll be building our clean tech recruitment desk here in the US and throughout North America, but, focused on the US currently. So that's what I'm doing now in terms of the types of technologies that we work with.
And how are you finding grasping all this technology?
It's so much, right? I mean, like, I came into this job knowing absolutely nothing, like literally nil about anything. So because I'm a genuinely curious person, it's been a little bit easier to learn it, but it's still not easy, right? I mean, you're talking to engineers and they're explaining to you how these things work, and you have to make sure that they're a good fit for the job that you're recruiting for. So it's like, there's just so many aspects and facets to it. So again, I feel like I'm pretty good at lots of the engineering stuff now, specifically, with some of the offshore wind engineering types of roles and, solar development engineering, those kind of things. But there's still so much to learn. And especially with clean tech, this is, why I've started my podcast, Clean Techies, is there's just so many technologies that are absolutely fascinating that the average person doesn't even know about, right? And I think that in terms of, like, I don't know how to answer the question, is there's just so many technologies out there, to grasp it all is nearly impossible, right? So I just try my best to understand the overall big picture of what we need to accomplish in order to get to our goals.
Yeah. And when we talk about the recruitment side, what's sort of the volume of the database? How many people are you dealing with that are looking for these positions within this industry now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to quantify it, to be honest. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot. What I would say is, just a general trend that I've seen is, especially with grads coming out of college and university, they're not interested in going into oil and gas. They see the writing on the wall, right? There's not a secure future for most oil and gas careers. And they also understand the urgency behind climate change and what we need to do. So I would say a lot of people, right? A lot of people, the huge numbers of people are going into this space and at least trying to find jobs in it. The talent market itself in the U.S. for renewable energy is pretty solid. I would say, especially with the new administration and kind of, it seems like we've got a shot, to kind of just like keep things, ticking up a little bit more than it was already. Um, there's a big surge of these newer, smaller developers coming up and smaller companies supporting it. And then there's also the clean tech ventures that are taking off, right? And the clean tech ventures are taking a lot of the more advanced talent from the market because those are people who've always been looking for the next thing. That's how they ended up in solar and wind in the first place. And now they're going off into these completely uncharted territories, creating a need back in those, already established. I consider solar and wind, like some people I'll talk to, they'll say it's like all new technology. It's like, no, solar is definitely not a new technology. We've got this down. Like this is going right. But it's creating a vacuum, right? People need to go into that space, and it's obviously they're making things happen. But I would definitely say there are certain areas in the space where there's a need for really specific talent. And that's kind of the thing I'm seeing a lot of companies learn how to shift into, is figuring out how to find the right type of talent that may not know exactly what they're doing, but they have the disposition to learn.
Right. And then one thing that's in my mind now as a question to you is, so you said that a lot of the grads are coming in and they're wanting to go into the new tech side of it, and they're not interested in oil and gas. Are we seeing the transition from oil and gas employment wanting to come into the renewable side? Are we seeing that transition happening?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, let's just put it this way. There's more people that want to move over than are able to get jobs right now, because what happened initially was, especially, I think the best comparison is between offshore wind and oil and gas. There's a lot of transferable skills, and anybody who understands the U.S. offshore wind market knows that there was some progress made with the Block Island wind farm way back. And then there was, people, they essentially tried to make it happen. I think it was the Cape Wind project that ended up going forward to a large extent, but then failed. And it was just a realization that it wasn't ready yet. But what happened was the gear up has been happening for offshore wind for a while. And because it requires so much capital, such a capital intensive market, it has brought a lot of European and Asian offshore wind developers to the US, and they've brought in their own talent initially to run very small teams. Now that companies like Equinor have secured the Empire lease space, and there's Ocean Winds up in Boston, along with the Park City project with CIP and Iberdrola. There's just so many jobs that will be created that it is creating more of a space for the oil and gas folks to come over. So I've seen a lot more happen over the past few months with the new administration coming in. But I would say that there's still a very big gap on how many people there are in oil and gas getting to renewables, right? And I think part of the question was, do people want to leave? Yes, a lot of people want to leave. I think the hard part is going to be for them, even though oil and gas is relatively unstable, depending on the year. The salaries are still pretty high, right? People are having a very hard time if they're not willing to take a salary cut to come into the renewable space, which, my advice to anybody in the oil and gas space looking would be, you may have to take a salary cut, but be wise about where you take that cut to get your foot in the door, because it's easy to go up quickly. You just need to be very wise about which entrance you go into.
Yeah. And then $1 million question. Notice I said the dollar in that case. If we was to switch off all of oil and gas, how quickly would we be able to get all them people transitioning into the renewable market? Or will we never do that? Is there just far too many people in that sector?
It's a hard question. I don't know. I think I'm a really firm believer in humanity, right? I think we always can find a way to pull ourselves out of any, bad situation. So I think for sure, if tomorrow every single oil and gas company literally just shut down, which I don't necessarily think is the greatest thing, we would find people jobs, right? There's already a lot of efforts with a lot of the nonprofits to create these, and there's already actually in Europe, there's a lot of them, but in the US, there's not as many, to create these certifications that once they've gone through, it's a reputable thing that people can stamp onto their resume, their CV, that they know, hey, this person can do this work. Yeah. But I guess, maybe just a thought on switching off oil and gas companies. While I don't obviously approve of any oil and gas being necessary in the future, I think there's a way around it for sure. Some people will disagree with me on that. No, but I think that the amount of capital they have to be able to pour into R&D projects is great. And I think they should. And I think any oil and gas company that is, using their future, putting their future goggles on, as my boss would say, they would be looking at what's happening and they would realize, hey, we need to do something about this. And we're actually well positioned to do it because they have so much talent. They have money to throw at the wall to redevelop these projects and come up with new technologies that they should. So yeah, that's a thought I wanted to add in there.
Are you sensing any friction between the two industries as well? Is there definitely a demarcation between the two?
A little bit. So I had I randomly stumbled into a Clubhouse room a couple of weeks ago where I thought it was a renewable energy Clubhouse chat, and it turns out I think it may have been intended to be that, but there was a lot of oil and gas folks in there. And this is the first time I really got to see behind the curtain because they were just, having their own chat about, they thought it was just them in there, right? And they're talking, they're kind of, I don't know if I feel like they were frustrated with the way renewable energy see them. And I think part of it is it seemed as though, again, not having the full context, it seemed as though they were kind of still under the belief that there's going to be a need for oil and gas. And maybe some people truly believe that, right? Maybe they're just not as optimistic as you or me. But I would say there's a little bit of friction, but it's probably, I don't think it's as widespread as people might think. I think renewable energy people, they want to see people come to the good side, as you might say, right? We want to see people come to this clean future idea. So I would say it's not terrible, but I'm sure there's definitely areas. And again, like I said, I've seen a little bit of it here and there, but it's not terrible.
Well, I've done some interviews with Elevate on their oil and gas predominantly. I've been collaborating with them. I think collaboration is such an important thing here. We need to all work together on this. We've all got this, we're all human beings and we've all got this issue. And some collaboration along the line. We don't need to be challenging each other's industries. We need to be working with each other. My background is power.
Yeah, this is not, this is a team sport, but it's us all together against climate change, right? It's not one team versus the other. We need to all work together.
Yeah. But unfortunately, there's big numbers. You're talking about the changing from one industry to the other, producing their salaries. That makes a big impact on their life.
It's tough. Families. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think again, being a little bit ignorant about oil and gas, maybe I'm missing something, but to me, just the safety. My understanding is that the work environment is much, much more safe with most renewable energy jobs, right? Obviously, there's certain high voltage electrical jobs that are very dangerous, regardless of renewables or not, right? But I just feel like the safety level for these people to be, being able to be home, the lives that they live. Again, construction teams, they're working really hard out on these solar farms, going away from home for a long time. But, it's better than being out in the ocean, right? Where so many things can go wrong with this drilling or whatnot.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about, you've been touching on your podcast. Let's give us some background to your podcast and where you are with that at the moment.
Yeah, so I run a podcast called Clean Techies, the podcast. So it's kind of part of a suite of things that I'm looking to create here. So basically, my vision for it is, given that I'm essentially an infant in this clean tech space, I'm learning, right? I'm just starting at the very beginnings, and I wish I knew more. I wish I had learned about this when I was much younger so I could be ahead of it further. But I realize that I'm not the only one, right? There's a lot of people out there who, even if they're going to university for these things and they're learning a lot about environment, et cetera, there's still so much we don't know, right? Because they can only curate so many things in those classes. So my goal is to just generally create a platform in a place that people can learn about the new technologies that are actually being created to help solve climate change. I think there's a huge misunderstanding. Again, I'm actually raised from a very conservative area of the country here. So there'd be people who I would say very much stick to, fracking and oil and gas. Like they think that solar and wind equals killing birds and no jobs. And I think there's just this huge misunderstanding that a cleaner future means no jobs because of the way, at least in the US, the political scene has cast it. So my goal with the podcast, and I also have a Clean Techies Slack channel for people to connect there, and there'll be a newsletter coming in pretty soon here. My goal is to share these technologies and show the benefits of them, right? There's a company I just interviewed recently, Carbon Cure Technologies. Interviewed the president there. They just won the Carbon X Prize for $20 million to create something of value out of carbon. And basically what they do is they take the carbon out of the air, they put it into concrete, reducing the concrete's carbon footprint and actually making the concrete stronger. And it doesn't cost as much. It costs about the same amount to make the concrete because they use less cement. So it's like there's literally no trade-offs. There's no negative trade-offs in the situation, and even the setup to get this technology in these concrete plants is very low. So that examples like that, it's my goal to share their stories, to just make people aware of what's going on, so that they don't just hear politicians and lobbyists talking about making, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera, without realizing and being able to see the actual value that's being created, right? I think so many people, especially again, where I came from, they don't realize some of the benefits of the money that the Obama administration invested into research and development of these technologies and helping with the solar credits. I know, economists will disagree on how these things work and if they're beneficial or not. But I think that people need to be more informed. And I just want to take this kind of very neutral standpoint of, I'm a curious person who wants to learn about this stuff. And I think everybody wants to learn about it. They just don't know where to start. So it's my goal is to put it in very simple terms through what I'm doing there. And again, to connect people around the world, because we've got a short timeline, right? We need to act quickly to create many, many innovations in order to achieve and to slow down climate change. That's basically what the podcast is all about.
Brilliant. So innovation for me, I've come across, you've been talking about the times you've been in the industry. You wish you'd got into it earlier. I've been in the industry for 40 years. And I wished in my earlier, when I was younger, let's say your age, I wish we had podcasts then. I wish we had the internet. I wish we had all these sort of, you mentioned Slack earlier, and I've only just getting into Slack, but, I've been using WhatsApp and all these sort of mediums. But if we only had them many years ago, I think we'd be further along the path of sort of saving and reducing climate change as such. But I've been involved with technologies for many years, and there's so many, and I can understand what people are saying, whether they don't trust it, they know that it can't do what it's supposed to be doing. And I go through a due diligence program. Not every technology passes that program,
Yeah.
The ones that do, they've got a great chance to survive it, and there's a lot out there. We need to give it, us as experts, need to give it the chance, and give them the chance to go and deliver what they're saying they can do.
Yeah, and I think something that just to me is also interesting is the idea of the dominant technology taking over, right? I think in Tom Rand's book, A Case for Climate Capitalism, I think that's the title, he talked about, his example was you've got a 4-lane highway and all the cars on there go, 40 miles an hour. And then somebody builds a car that can go 70, but you still got 4 lanes full of cars that go 40 miles an hour. So it's like, you need to not only keep innovating, but you need, adopt new technology, but you need to also make room for the even better technology, because at the speed of innovation we're having, this is happening already. I'm seeing it. I think an example would be in energy storage, right? There's these pretty sizable batteries that have been developed. some chemical versions and some mineral versions, and they're great. But there's also other technologies like Hydrostore, I think, is one that recently just made some news, where they're able to create this very, very long powering battery through some very simple technology. But it's going to be interesting to see whether or not people start to adopt it, if they are fine with it, because we have this adoption curve, right? Everybody has a tendency, once they get comfortable with something, they want to just stick with it because they know how it works. And that's something we can't afford at this point in the game, right? We need to keep changing. Every time there's an improvement, we need to make it happen. We can't just be stuck to our old ways.
And the only other drawback really at the moment is the cost of that new innovation. So the cost of the new innovation is always more expensive than what it would be if it's more established. So what happens is the return on investment goes up, or it's longer to pay back. Organizations don't want to invest in that, so it doesn't happen. But then they bring in lower quality technology, which is cheaper but hasn't got the quality. And then it's this whole problem.
Yeah, it's a terrible cycle. It's so difficult because that's the whole thing with the government issuing credits for certain things, right? I think it's a powerful item. It's a powerful thing they can do, but at the same time, you have to be so cautious, because if you do something intending for one intention, you might actually end up with something completely different, right? And I think that's why, it's just a criticism in general of governments, which I don't know how much they can change this. It's good. It's partially good and partially bad. Is you need to have the speed of innovation with the governments too, right? Realizing, oh, we made a mistake. We need to change that because it's creating actually effects we didn't intend. So yeah, it's a tough one, especially with energy credits and, different carbon credits in general.
Yeah. I always tell a story about the building management system, the BMS, where, I worked in a power station back in the 80s, and power stations and pharmaceuticals were the only people that have BMS, because they were too expensive. They didn't give the return on investment. Then in the 90s, we then started seeing them providing, nearly 1 in 3 buildings. Now nearly every building has got a building management system. And guess what? Every house now probably has a nest or a hive or some form of BMS system within them. So we've seen that evolve. That's taken a long time, from all the way from the 80s to get those benefits. We do need to speed it up. Innovation needs to be accelerated now. It needs the support from the government, it needs grants. It just needs, the full-on support from everybody to drive that.
I think I don't know exactly what he called it, but in Tom Rand's book, he mentioned some type of vehicle that he thinks is the best way to do that, where it's essentially the government provides the capital, but it's run by individuals who are basically venture capitalists. They understand the game. They need to make a return in order to make their investors, in this case would be, either people purchasing green bonds, so individual citizens, or the government, right? And I think that could be an interesting solution, because you have, free market people who understand that they need to invest in the technologies that not only solve the problem, that can have, can be scaled quickly, but also have a good return. And I think that, along with something else I find interesting, is because this, job of ours to create a sustainable world is important, we aren't going to be as stingy with the technology. You see, like Elon Musk making a lot of their stuff, free for all their patent. He didn't patent the stuff. He just let everybody have it, right? And I think that a lot more of that is going to happen in this space, because while people want to, they want to have a monopoly, they want to make money, they want to be kind of the main market share, et cetera, they also realize that this is not the time to be stingy. That's why I think it's interesting, because so many of these technologies that can be built can much more quickly be applied to other things, right? They take the base level tech and then they put it onto another technology that's taking something else and kind of putting them together. Whereas in the past, with standard capitalism, and where it's everybody only out for themselves, it goes many years, maybe a decade, before the technology is really discovered or shared at all. And by that time, there could have been so many more things happen. So I think that that's an interesting space. And that's part of the reason with the Slack channels. I want to connect people around the world that they can share these things, because we need to accelerate this transition.
Yeah. So where can we find your podcast? Where's the best place for our audience to check out?
Yeah, so I actually was just getting everything finished up today, but it should be on every major podcasting platform, wherever you get your podcast. The last one I'm trying to get locked down is Pandora. But if a way you can find and just kind of follow what's going on is on my personal website. I have a page for it. So it's silasmähner.com/cleantechies. And that's where I have the links to the newsletter, the podcast, the Slack channel, etc. But if you search most places, it's Clean Techies, the podcast.
Brilliant. Excellent. So Silas, as I alluded to before we went live today, I really like everyone to give a takeaway and tell us what we can take back from our interview today. Is there anything you can give back to the industry personally?
I think the thing that's most important to me in general, I alluded to it a little bit at the beginning with kind of my mission in general for the future, is creating companies that, I didn't maybe go into detail, but what I want to do is create companies that people can go to work knowing that A, they are making the world a better place, but also B, that they are going to be treated well. And I think that this is a very prime industry, the clean tech space in general, climate tech, etc., just everything inside of ESG. We have the opportunity to not only create positive technology and positive business practices, but to treat our people well and to not see people as just numbers. So I think that anybody listening, especially I think your audience would be prime for this, is we all have a responsibility not only to our earth, but to our people. So treat people around you with respect and try to build the best types of organizations you can as you guys continue to, help us make these changes happen.
Brilliant. That's awesome. Silas, I really resonate with what you've just said. There was one question I forgot to ask you right in the beginning. You said you're one of 8 children.
Yes.
And I'm really curious, are you sort of like the oldest or the youngest or in the middle?
I'm the oldest.
Wow.
It's a great time.
Sorry?
It's a great time. We love it. I wouldn't trade my siblings for anything.
Oh, bless. That must have been an amazing household, especially at dinner.
Oh yeah. And we ate every meal together besides lunch.
Oh, that is amazing. Well, look, Silas, really appreciate you coming on today. It's great hearing your story. I'm really excited about your podcast and what you're doing because that really aligns with the Energy Experts program I'm developing. And I wish you well with that. And I'd like to say, be safe, you and your family.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Paul. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for our special guest today. And thank you for our sponsors, B2B Energy, which can be found at b2benergy.co.uk, and Clean Energy Revolution, which can also be found either through various different social media networks. Type in #Clean Energy Revolution. That leaves me with one more thing to say. Be safe.